really interesting journal article to go over with you today. Of course, I think every article is I cherry pick. This is all about cherry picking, right? This is total social media cherry picking. Like you don't put every picture you take of yourself on the gram. I don't put any pictures of myself on the gram for good reason, but you only put the one that you really like. So it's the same with these articles. I read a lot of articles, and one of them really sticks out to me. I try to share it with you, and this is one that really popped out to me as interesting. And the reason is it's combining two different ideas. Did I say my name is Dr. Miller already? I don't know. You don't have to call me Dr. Miller. I'm like a fake doctor. I can't really save anybody's life unless it involves using the barbell, so only indirectly. So just call me Jason. The study though looked at using what's called post-activation potentiation, or PAP, or PAPE now as we're calling it. At least some people are calling it post-activation performance enhancement. And so we're basically saying, well, we don't think that neurological mechanism called post-activation potentiation is really the thing that's the mechanism here. Regardless, if we just kind of say, okay, there's a black box there and there is a positive effect, the PAP, I'm going to call it PAP for the intents and purposes of this video, just because that's what it's called in this article. The PAP effect is, if you lift something heavy not to failure, and then you wait for a predetermined amount of time, then you do something that's lightweight or body weight, you're going to have an enhancement in performance. So an example might be, you measure your vertical jump after a warm up. Okay, there's your control. Then you decide to do 1 or 2 reps at 87.5% precisely back squat, and then you're going to jump after a 4-minute rest. So that's a complex. This is from the work of Yuri Verkhoshansky back in the 60s. 4 minutes seems to be optimal. This is also strength trained people, usually the ones that only see benefit from this because they can handle heavier loads and recover from them in a timely manner, right? So there's some prerequisites to this, but essentially you do something heavy not to failure, maybe half of the volume what you could. So 3 reps at 80%, rest 4 minutes ish, and then jump. You're going to jump higher. It's going to be significantly higher than if you did not do some sort of a primer exercise. Okay, so that's the PAP effect. On the other side is bodybuilding, okay, or hypertrophy training or gaining mass, and volume appears to be the main driver, right? And that doesn't mean intensity doesn't matter. Related to that, doesn't mean failure not to failure doesn't matter. But what it does mean is there has to be some sort of progressive increase in volume over time in order to see sustained changes in skeletal mass hypertrophy. Now, keep in mind, I have a video on non-functional versus functional. I hate those words, but that's just what's being used a lot of times. Hypertrophy. Somebody who lifts 85% at does 3 sets of 5, they can gain skeletal muscle mass too. It's just going to take them longer, right? So 15 reps versus 30. If I do 3 by 10 at 70 to 75%, I can get more volume in. Now the muscle, the way the muscle changes is going to be a little different. That muscle that the bodybuilder or the weightlifter builds over 10 years is going to be different than the same muscle size potentially that the bodybuilder has in 5 years. But the size wise, they're probably, I'm just showing it, using these timestamps as a way to display the differences. It takes bodybuilder 5 years to get the same amount of leg growth as it does the weightlifter takes 10 years, but the 10-year gain is more about contractile protein. So that's a stronger muscle than the one that was done through higher volume, because the muscle adapts to the stimulus, the SAID principle. So bottom line, volume matters. How's that? Okay, I'll go down that rabbit trail. If you want to watch that video, watch it. Okay, so this study does a nice job. It's an acute study, so I'm tying things together here. I'm saying, okay, this is really interesting. If this study was set up in such a way, and I'll explain it in a second, that it kind of tied these two worlds together. Okay, I'm going to make some inferences that may or may not be true, because this was not a training study. This was an acute study. Okay, this was let's just see what happens when we prime the pump a little bit. We do some sort of heavy exercise. Does that influence the amount of volume that's done following that pump? So this was the study. Post-activation potentiation improves acute resistance exercise performance and muscular force in trained men by Frietas et al. This was in 2021, so published this year, the time I'm releasing this video. These were trained men, and I wouldn't say they were well-trained men. I think their back squat average was 105, if I recall. We're talking about kilos here. Yeah, rounded up to 105, and their body mass was 82, rounded up. So, and that's no standard deviations included there, which were pretty large, which is not uncommon. But in general, at least they could squat their body weight as a group. Okay, doesn't look like they're approaching 1.5. So I would call them more novice to intermediate lifters. I wouldn't call them intermediate, or certainly not advanced in any way, but trained. Okay, it depends on what you define trained. Sure. There were 4 different visits. So first of all, they determined the 1 RM. This was in the back squat, and then these individuals did 4 different conditions They either came in and did no PAP and then did maximum voluntary isometric contractions. They sat like in a leg extension, basically a dynamometer, and just exerted as much force as possible against a fixed arm, and so just measured isometric force. Okay, and then they did a PAP condition. So the PAP condition was 2 reps at 90% of 1 RM, 5 minutes rest, and then did the maximum voluntary contraction, then isometric contraction, and then the other 2 conditions were about repetition. So one group just came in, warmed up, and did the 4x10 at 70%, 2-minute rest in between, as many reps as possible. That's like the start of German volume training. That's pretty brutal. For German volume training is less rest, but anyway. So they got 2 minutes rest and so on. The PAP group came in, warmed up, and then they did 2 reps at 90%, then rested 5 minutes, and then did the 4 sets of 10 at 70% of 1 RM. Okay. Now, of course, the PAP effect, not surprisingly, induced a significantly greater difference in peak force, isometric peak force, so the maximal isometric contraction force after PAP. So I'm not going to focus on that as much. The authors were doing some other, looking at a lot of cool variables. I'm not saying it's not important or not interesting, but I think we've seen enough research. I feel like I've seen enough research that I'm comfortable saying, okay, I get it. If you do a PAP, if you do something before that's heavy, then you're going to get a better strength and power response. I was interested, though, in the volume, and that was the part of the study that kind of popped out to me. And lo and behold, the PAP group, so when they did the heavy 2 reps, they got more total repetitions, significantly more repetitions than did the non-PAP group, okay? And just looking kind of at the figure here, the total repetition change, I'm going to estimate that around 7 reps. 7 reps. So 7 reps more when they did the heavier the primer. So one time, 2 reps, 90%, rest 5 minutes, did the 4x10 with 2-minute rest. Okay, they got 7 more reps total, 7 more reps out of the training. When you look at the set by set breakdown, not surprisingly, those 7 reps, those 7 reps came in the first set. Okay, so if this makes sense, right? So PAP induces so either it's a warm-up effect or the neurological effect. If it's PAP, we're calling it a neurological effect. That should then allow for more repetitions on the first set. That makes sense, and the amount of volume that was done in the subsequent sets was not different. Okay, so you got that boost on that first set. All right. What does this mean long term? And this study does not answer that question. This is where I'm tying strings together that may not be there. But even if you did a primer set before bodybuilding training, okay, on a compound movement, I don't know if I would do this with like biceps curls or something. If you got 7 more reps per session, and this was to failure, so I'll talk about some potential things, other things, but 7 more reps per session, that's going to add up. Like if you squatted every week, if you just look at the back squat only, and you got 7 more reps every single session ish, somewhere in there, that's like 30 reps. That's almost like a whole nother session, okay, per month that you gained, roundabouts that you gained by doing this PAP effect. That could be beneficial long term. Now, this study does not address that, so we don't know what would happen long term. Okay, we can make guesses, but this is an acute study. I just think that's the interesting part to think about, though. Other things to think about. What if they did not go to failure each set? Obviously the fatigue from the first set wiped out the other 2. Any PAP effect that was there was gone because fatigue masked it. What if you didn't go to failure? How long would that PAP effect last? And would that allow for maybe not more reps, but more sets? So could you add another set? You could set up a velocity-based system, or when the load dropped. I mean, there's a lot of ways to set this up. What if you did 2 sets and then did another primer set? Understanding the person could be tired, but if you didn't go to failure, they wouldn't be as tired as they would if they do go to failure. So probably a bad idea if you do 2 sets to failure, then go back and do a 90% to try to prime the other 2 sets, but maybe it would still help. I don't know. But just a lot of interesting questions. Because I've always thought about, and I know there's been other research in this area, but it just kind of popped out to me. I know this has been talked about. This is not like anything like this is brand new. It's never been talked about. I get it. But this study just kind of brought it to my mind. Like, I always think about PAP in the sense of always trying to drive strength changes and power development. Knowing that this effect could in fact help, but I hadn't seen any direct research of late that I probably read something maybe once. I don't know. I don't want to lie. I don't remember seeing a study like this. Maybe that's why it popped out of my brain so much. But the idea has been around, right? I've heard this pushed around. This is nothing new. But to see a study that actually kind of analyzed it was pretty cool. Okay, and I think the authors say that nobody's ever done this before, so maybe that's why I've never seen a study. I can't remember if I had. So anyway, what does this mean for you in your training? Well, just like I said, maybe on a compound movement, warm yourself up, and if you're going to bench and the goal of the session is, well, either way, but the goal of the session is hypertrophy training, maybe hit a heavy double or heavy triple, not to failure, have a 4-minute rest or so, and then go about your way in terms of whatever volume training you're going to do that day. And at least that first set, you should feel amazing enough to push the volume a little bit more than you would traditionally. Okay. Maybe it allows for another set at the end. I don't know. If you try it out, let me know. I might mess around with it here in the lab when I train. And the time recording this, summer's about to hit, so I'm gonna have more time to do things other than grade papers. So that should be a lot of fun. I might mess around with this summer as well. I've got some weight releasers and a linear transducer I'm gonna mess around too. Okay, so I won't tell you about my toys. Sorry. But take a look at this study. I'll leave the link for it in the video description. I think well done study. A lot of cool variables interacting with one another, and maybe worth your time to take a look at and then think about its application. If you haven't already, subscribed to my channel. Like this video if you like it. I have a whole series. Well, I don't know how way up that this is I think this is the 13th Journal Club, book reviews. I got all kinds of stuff going on. Check it out. Lots of videos on different topics. Surely there's something that you might find interesting. If not, shoot me a message and let me know what you'd like me to talk about. I'll talk about that too. All right, see you next video.